Hi everybody, in the 10-minute workshop this week we're taking a closer and more detailed look, a slightly longer look if you like, at what started out as a fairly simple set of painted shells but rapidly grew into something much bigger and much more complicated. All that good stuff is coming up next. So welcome back. This is going to be a longer video, just to give you a quick heads up, a quick warning. There's a lot of detail in this and that takes time to explain sometimes. I'm just conscious of not having done much in the way of making style videos for a little while, and this was a good opportunity to go through an entire job from start to finish and go through all the details of the build. There's very little on the install, my apologies, because I was under a lot of time pressure for that, but that's how it goes sometimes. There is an even longer and more detailed version of this video on my Patreon channel, by the way, for my Patreon supporters, where I also go through some of the background on this, some behind the scenes stuff, some of the mistakes I made while I was building it, because it's the first build that I've done in a while, and also a little bit of post-install chat, where I also go into some of the details on the costings as well. So if that's sounds like your kind of thing, then head over to patreon.com/10-minute workshop and join the Patreon party and take a look at that video there as well. Well, let's get into this one. This came about because as I mentioned in when I did my end of year roundup and my how much money does YouTube make videos, I mentioned that I'm stepping back from the fitted furniture side of things. I'll still do the odd little job just to keep a bit of money flowing through, but I really don't want to do the big builds, the big installs anymore. I've got one plan which is happening later this month, which was on the books already, but that's the last one really. This one is one of those things that came in through a cold call, an email basically. Somebody found me, had me recommended by somebody that I haven't worked with for ages, and they said they wanted a small set of shelves. Now, you want a small set of shelves, I generally think of, you know, something sort of fairly simple. Maybe it's a wall shelf, wall hung, fairly straightforward sort of thing. And maybe you have a central divider in it, and maybe you can divvy that up as well. But you know, a small set of shelves is what they said. So okay, I said fine. You know, give me some rough dimensions on it, and I'll give you an idea of price. And then if that's in the right kind of ballpark, we'll go from there. Well, the dimensions she sent to me were, instead of being, you know, a couple of feet wide and 18 inches high, 600 by 450 or whatever, the dimensions she sent were 2.5 meters high and 500 mils square basically, and it is a tall, slim unit to go between a fitted wardrobe and a wall. She wanted it for box files, but she also wanted a lockable cabinet at the base of it. Okay, so that's, you know, changes the game in terms of pricing. I put some plans together like these and gave her an idea of cost on that, and she said, yeah, that's fine. So then I need to go and do a site visit and to double check the measurements. And whilst I was doing that site visit, it became, through the conversation, she decided that she wanted the shelves to go all the way up to the ceiling, which is a little bit of a game changer. She didn't want them fitted, but she wanted fitted style, so on a little plinth. And simple and painted, but the shelves are spaced for box files, and now because she's gone all the way up to the ceiling, it means that the cabinet at the base here is that much taller. So I suggested having an adjustable shelf in there as well. All seemed like a good idea. The site visit threw up a couple of problems as well, where there's it's a very narrow space, and obviously going into the ceiling you've just got to try and slot it in, almost have it upright and slot it straight in, but that's not going to happen because there's a doorway, so you've got architrave, and you've also got quite a hefty, quite a chunky entry phone system there as well, so you've got to work around that. So fairly obviously it needed to be split into two halves, so you could have work one half in and then get the upper half in over the top, which also made it easier to get into the place because this is a 4th floor apartment in London's swanky Notting Hill neighbourhood. So parking is going to be a problem. All these things sort of meant that Obviously, I needed to re-quote on this or rethink the estimate. I did that and sent her a rough set of plans as well. And she was very happy with both of those. So that's when we started getting into the workshop and getting things made. We're joining the project partway in. I had the carcasses are 18mm MRMDF. All the shelves are 22mm, because I never know quite how much box files are going to hold. They could be quite heavy. And the backs are 6mm MRMDF. So the 18 and the 6mm I had cut by my timber yard. The 22mm I already had quite a lot here already, so I used the materials that I had and cut that up myself. And then the 18mm for the doors and the internal shelves I already had from bits and pieces as well. So it was just a question. The whole thing was very simply constructed. 18mm, 22mm, MRMDF dominoes, glues and screws, 6mm MRMDF for the backs, which was just stapled on, and then we could get things moving. With the shelves all cut, I'm using the LR32 rail and router to drill the 5mm holes for the adjustable shelf in the cabinet. Note the black tape on the rail to show me the start and stop points. It's surprisingly easy to overshoot if you don't have something like this in place. So long-term viewers will know what I'm doing here, but just for the folks who are relatively new to the channel, I'm using Festivals Domino to make the joints. I've used the Domino plate, lots of videos about that, to cut the base mortises. I'll put screws in this as well, but these are just to locate it. And for the top shelf, I've got to put the same things inboard for each side, and I've drawn a line where I want my centre to be. I take the plate off the Domino, and I'm just going to use the marks on the base to align where the centre of the cutter is going to be, and I'm going to use the back of the rail on the MFT to do that. I'm using the registration pins on my Domino to set the edge distance, taking care on the opposite side that I don't accidentally reference off the MFT fence. Okay, so these are for the inboard shelves. So this is the top stack of shelves, and these will sit on the lower cabinet. I've got 2 inboard shelves to do, and what I've done is I've marked them out equidistant, so they're equally spaced. I've got to put a centre line on these using a little scrap of offcut, and with that centre line I can then do the same trick as I did before and cut the inboard mortises. And I know I'm working off the pins to the rear because we're working off the back edge, but off a centre line, off a pencil mark. For the front edge, because the shelves are trimmed short, so they're set back slightly. So that's what we'll do now. I'm setting the position of the domino against the pencil line, and then setting the flag stop so I can cut the dominoes for this shelf on each side of the carcass. Then I can repeat this for the lower shelf, resetting the flag slot for this new position. To make the two halves of the shelves together, I'm using dominoes to locate and a single Clamex fitting to lock them in place, with the Clamex position referenced from the front edge. With all the machining done, I want to get a rough dry fit to make sure that the top and bottom carcasses fit together nicely. So these are just dominoed together and clamped up to keep them from coming apart, with a corner clamp as well to try and keep it reasonably square. And with the two halves fitting as planned, I'm taking the slightly oversized backs and marking them for trimming back later, first on the lower cabinet, and then on the upper. And with the carcasses separated, I can lift the lower cabinet upright, square it up, and just check that the inset door is a good fit. And then check that there's no wobble on the interior adjustable shelf. And with all well, we can strip everything down again, drill the access holes for the Clamex connectors, and start the fun process that is paintwork preparation. This is a relatively small job, and to be honest I couldn't face setting up the spraying gear, so I'm opting to roller this instead, first with my standard water-based acrylic primer undercoat, then a D-nib with a finishing sander, and then the first of a few top coats in water-based acrylic with an eggshell finish. Once completely dry, I scuff the glue lines up with some abrasive, and then we can start the glue up. I'm using Spax MDF or M-cut screws to keep everything together, but I'm also putting a clamp on at each front edge domino position. With everything touch dry, I can start in on the top cabinet using dominoes, glue and screws just like before. Okay, that's all in clamps and all screwed and glued. We'll give that 10 minutes or so to set before we're thinking about moving it. And then what I want to do is flip these over on their faces and get the two halves mated together. I'm going to put the bottom half of the Climax connectors in there and make sure that they meet okay, and then I'll fix the backs on, because we don't want to fix the backs on and then discover that they don't quite meet up. That would be disappointing. So we'll let that set anyway, 10 minutes or so, and we'll come back to that in a minute. That's pretty much spot on. I always like to do this when I've got it just sort of dry assembled, roughly like this. The two halves mate together really nicely. The base is, the plinth is all fixed and ready to go, and the overall length, the overall height is going to be right. I'm not sort of bursting through the ceiling or coming down too low, so that's all good. I'm going to fix the back in place on the top one, but I'm going to leave the back off the bottom one for now, because fitting the door onto the cabinet, it's convenient to have the back, convenient to be able to get in from the back to be able to do that. But I'm going to staple this top one on, and obviously these are staggered so that they overlap on that bottom shelf, so you don't see a join that's sort of flapping around. So I'm going to get this stapled on now, and then I call it a day for today, and we'll get on with the door and the latch and all the other stuff tomorrow. But yeah, a few staples whacked through that top cabinet, and then we can go home. So yes, next day with the hinge plates fitted, I can pop the door on, then tweak that into position so it's fitting snugly. And then set about fitting the lock. And with the lock sorted, finally, I can get the back stapled on. And I think I'm going to leave it there for this video. there's not a whole lot more to say about it, to be honest, other than to say that I will almost certainly not be able to shoot video on the installation. I've only got a 2-hour window literally to get through the front door, up to the 3rd floor and up to the 2nd floor of the apartment, and get this all fitted and get out of there, because that's all the time they've got available. So it's a fairly straightforward, fairly simple little set of shelves in 2 halves with a lockable cabinet in the bottom. I'm going to give the client the option of having a knob on that, little painted knob. But generally, if you want a locking cabinet, it's better not to give anybody any sort of purchase on the outside, nothing you can get a hold of and try and force it. So up to them anyway, whatever they want. But that's kind of it really. There's an adjustable shelf to go in there. There's a plinth here, oops, and a little plinth cover. I'll scribe that to the skirting and just pop that on with double-sided tape. But it's not technically a fitted piece, it is a freestanding piece, even though it's going into a very skinny sort of alcove shape. But that's what they wanted, and that's what they'll get. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, share it amongst your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more weekly workshop videos. I'd like to take a second just to thank my lovely Patreon supporters, whose contributions really do help me to keep the lights on here, and obviously having the lights on whilst you're making videos is a real bonus. If you're interested in what's happening in the Patreon party, then come over to patreon.com/10-minute workshop, where you can have a quick rummage around, a quick rootle, and see what I'm up to. Amongst other things, my Patreon supporters get a week in the workshop vlog of what I've been up to during the course of the week, plus a few other one-off special builds and things like that, a few more behind the scenes and bits and pieces. But anyway, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.